So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Museum ArtBreak series and Artist Talk with Shaina Gates. I'm Sarah Claflin, Education and Communications Manager for the museum and the moderator for the session. Today's talk will be recorded and available on YouTube at a later time, and I'll be able to send you that link as soon as possible. The session will last about 50 minutes, and I'll begin with a brief introduction. And then hand it over to Shaina for her 20-minute talk, followed by questions and answers. Please feel free to use the chat throughout this talk for questions or comments. I'd like to thank the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for their partnership and support of our current exhibition Impact. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Shaina Gates, Exeter artist and finalist of the 2020 Piscataqua Regional Artist Advancement Grant from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Shaina's works on display are unique camera-less photograms. They are made only using sunlight and the manipulated paper itself to create the image without the use of negatives, darkroom technology, or digital tools. Using these camera-less photographic processes allows her to map the physical experience of the paper, materializing the paper's memory as a visible record. Today, Shaina will tell us more about her studio practice and works on display. And I hand it over to you, Shaina.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to make sure my connection is stable. So, Sarah, can you just let me know that you're hearing me smoothly?
Yes, absolutely. You're good.
Okay.
You're
it was
good,
a little
yeah.
choppy on my end. Okay.
Okay.
So I will start out by thanking the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and the jurors of the Piscataqua Regional Arts Advancement Grant for offering this generous award and for selecting me as a finalist for 2 years in a row now. Thank you, Sarah and Laura and Christina and the fellowship students at the museum for working hard to put the show together. And congratulations to my co-finalist Jocelyn Toffick and also to the 2020 grant recipient Carl Hyatt. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is a sort of a tangled up version of a slideshow that I'm going to sort of try to untangle for you. I'll take you through, starting with the work that's in the museum right now, I'll take you through the processes for making those pieces, as well as connecting it to the work that I was doing previous to this in drawing and painting, and talk about more about what I'm doing currently with both the Cyanotype and the Lumen Print process, but especially working with film. So these are the works that are in the museum right now. On the left are two pretty large cyanotypes. Those are the bigger one is 60 inches high, and the one on the right I think is 58 inches high. So that's about 5 feet, which is exactly how tall I am. And those sort of yellow and brown ones on the right those are Lumen prints. And I'll explain more about both of those processes in a second. But just to connect, as Sarah pointed out, reading the introduction to my work, they're both they're both alternative photographic processes. And they are made using, and they both use sunlight to expose the light sensitive paper. And in my case, I'm not using a camera. I'm not using any kind of digital manipulation. I'm not putting objects or anything on top of the sensitized paper. It's just the folded or crumpled paper itself exposed to the sun and then fixed to stabilize the image so it doesn't keep being exposed. So cyanotype, the process for making a cyanotype, which is the same thing as a blueprint, is there are two chemical salts that get combined with water, and when they're mixed together into that solution, they become light sensitive. And so that solution is painted onto, in this case, pretty large paper. Can also be painted onto like wood or fabric or essentially anything organic. The paper is then exposed to the sun. And when it's exposed, the sun reacts with that photosensitive solution to produce the pigment Prussian blue. So that's that brilliant blue that you see in those images there. And then it gets washed out in a big water bath. So for these prints, I have, they're too large to even process like in a bathtub. So I built a really big like water tray that I can expand, as my work gets bigger, it's sort of modular, so I can keep expanding it. To make my work in particular, to make these works, I have these big sheets of paper that are, they're sensitized and they've dried out in a dark room. So then I fold them in half, or in the images that you're seeing right here, they're folded into thirds, and then I crumple them up. But when I'm crumpling them, I'm making sure that they are become a completely flattened form. And in doing so, it means that there are all these geometric limitations imposed on the folded structure. So where I start to crumple it starts to distort the plane in other areas. And so as I'm going along, I'm feeling around more for like places where the paper needs to kind of collapse and compress in order to get it to lie flat without ripping. These two, along with this one over here and a few other cyanotypes, are all going to be in a show that opens on Friday at a new gallery space in Vermont called Tourist. And that you can find, they're on Instagram at tourist.bt. I imagine if you just search tourist, you're not going to get very far. So here's a couple more of those. If I back out a little bit, we can see the newer cyanotypes in relationship with some of my past work. So these two are graphite drawings on paper. They are 50 inches high by 38 inches wide, both of them. And these down here are oil paintings. They're fairly small. So this one's 8 inches by 8 inches, and this one is 10 inches by 10 inches, and 8 inches by 8 inches again. And these two, the two oil paintings on the bottom left they're two separate paintings. It's not just a blow up of the same one. So with this older work, previous work, it's not, I don't really think of it as old, but with the previous work, I was really interested in how sort of like with these origami figures or just the crumpled paper figures, I was, there's this three-dimensional form, and then it is opened back up, and then there's this map of all the creases, so sort of that record as image, and then taking a photograph of that, and then printing the photograph, and then drawing from the photograph. I was also using scanning in some other works. But all these sort of transfers of the image sort of through different material surfaces was really interesting to me. So then here's this watercolor painting was also in the same impact show along with these two large drawings. And I'll sort of zoom in here. And the one next to it is a cyanotype. This one, rather than being a crumpled surface, it's folded and exposed while it's still in the folded state. And it's on purple paper, so as opposed to white. To make the models for these watercolor paintings, so there's another one there from that series, I was looking at this research paper, or basing it on this research where the study looked at how if like this, so if you, I'll zoom in a little more. So this crumpled paper ball gets marked all around the outside, and when it's opened back up, the researchers were mapping the exterior surfaces in relation to the interior surfaces, and just how that structure is interrelated. So I borrowed from that study, and instead of folding and crumpling into a ball, I was still restricting it to the flat folding, which for me is important just to kind of continue with this, the idea that the composition and the folded structure is all, it's all very logical rather than like gestural. And so to make the models for these paintings, I was crumpling it, getting it flat, and spray painting both sides, and then potentially digitally manipulating the color, and then printing it out, and then making the painting from that. So this sort of transfer process that I talked about before. And in order to move that work forward or evolve the work, I was thinking about different ways to make the models for the paintings, one of which was using cyanotype, sort of just like more efficient and a little bit more accurate rather than the spray painting. But once I did that, I realized that the cyanotypes don't need to be painted because they're already an image. The image becomes embedded in the material. And then here, just to compare them, these paintings also to the crumpled ones as opposed to just the folded cyanotypes. There's like a more real result with the cyanotypes to me, because even though I'm aiming at realism, or these can be classified as realistic paintings and drawings, the image in the cyanotypes is the actual record of that material surface's experience. So the surface becomes the image. They're inseparable. And that there's something, that's sort of fun. As a phenomenological thing, that's really exciting to me. So here is another one of the watercolors compared with those cyanotypes. And that takes us back to these Lumen prints that are in the current show at UNH. So there they are on the wall, better images of them there. So the Lumen printing process involves using black and white darkroom photography paper. So normally this paper is used to make black and white photographs under controlled lighting conditions with a photographic negative in a darkroom. In this experimental process, the paper is exposed to the sun for a really extended period of time. It starts out white or kind of cream colored, and the sun exposure starts to darken the silver that's in the paper's emulsion. And along with that, there are all kinds of additives in the paper that are intended to improve the black and white darkroom process in terms of like contrast or getting finer detail or all kinds of things. But that combination of additives along with the darkening silver produces this like array of colors. And along with that, what's exciting to me also is that while I'm mapping this exterior surface, in sort of continuing to keep stealing from that topology research, the Lumen printing process also records the interior structure of that folded form. So you can see sort of my crazy diagram there, where I have mapped out like the number of layers of paper will affect the color. And then other things that affect the color are, you know, along with the additives, are also like heat and humidity, and the filter, like if the UV light is filtered, that also kind of can change the color. So I really am excited about the idea with the lumen printing, and also with the cyanotype, that the color is produced. So here's a lumen print, lumen print, lumen print together in this view. The color is produced as an incident from the process. It's, you know, it's totally contingent on environmental factors and its own chemistry. It's not produced, you know, the manufacturers of the papers aren't intending these colors. They're just intending like good black and white photographs. And so for the color to not be decorative and be more, you know, sort of adds to that idea of like the more real realism. So here's a colored pencil drawing, like making the model for this, you know, it's like I'm choosing the lavender paper and I'm choosing the orange spray paint, or I'm changing it in the computer to make the color more exciting. But with the lumen prints, the color is available in the material. Go through some more of these lumen prints here. So you can see, like, as I go, there's hundreds of types of paper, and it's really exciting to think about all the color variety possible. So here's I made this little compilation at some point. I have more papers since then, but this gives you a sense of the range of color. You know, just in my, what is this, 20 pieces of paper, 20 different types of paper. So these framed works are all part of this show Lucid, which is at Gallery 263 in Cambridge right now. I titled the show Lucid because sort of thinking about the paper doing the work. So I'm folding it and I'm putting it out to be exposed, but you know, that seems like a mediating process. It seems to me that the paper is doing the recording and the remembering. So there are these 3 large lumen prints in that show. So those are sheets cut off of a really large roll of silver gelatin paper. 3 different rolls, as is evidenced by the color there. I think that in my work, like, you know, I have those really large drawings, I have the really large cyanotypes. I think that for me, like, once I have a grounding in, you know, as my practice shifts through different subject matter, through different processes and materials, once I have a grounding, getting big and getting, like, you know, it seems like I go for this body-sized work, or my body size, and so that I begin to understand the physicality of the material, which is something I feel like I keep saying physicality of the material all the way through this talk. So also in this exhibition are these lumen prints on film, which just like there's this variety of paper, right? There's also a variety of black and white film. And so like once a week, I Google like lumen printing on film, or like film-based experimental lumen process, you know, like every combination that I can come up with. And there's there's so little information about it. And in that way, this is really, the work on film is really exciting, just from a material studies kind of standpoint. And to me, this material is so exciting. I'm excited for, like, to see what other artists have done with it or do with it, but that I want, you know, like, yeah, so here's a view of one, you know, you can see from that grid, viewing one from the side, you can see that the film Lumen prints are transparent. So these are 6 inches by 6 inches framed to 12 by 12 and then off the wall, 3 and 3.5 inches. They are framed this way, or I designed these frames in order to maximize the transparent quality. But I really liked, so they're sandwiched between 2 pieces of acrylic glass. So it's almost, it becomes like a little glass specimen slide that you would put into a, like a microscope. So I'll back out here and show you these 4. So this is, each one of these is, you know, obviously the framed version and the scanned version. And my like scanner from 2010, it's also a printer and all those things. Like, it's not a photographic scanner, so it catches these highlights on the folded film. Oh, one thing I want to point out is, like, even so, talking about how just the quality of light can change the results. This in the top right and then the bottom right here, those are the same kind of film, but the one on top is exposed indoors for maybe a week or 2 weeks, or the indoor exposures take longer, especially in the winter. But then this one was exposed outdoors on just one sunny day. So, you know, one is sort of this mauve color and the other one is this fiery, like coral orange. So just like the UV filtering in my modern windows is affecting the film's recorded image. So here's an installation in that show at Gallery 263. It was, I proposed it and created it specifically for the show in that space. So each one of those is 48 inches high by 36 inches wide, and they take up an area of 12 feet by 6 feet. And with the backlighting, as opposed to sort of projecting the image through the front of them, you can see just how transparent even the darker areas are. So here's one in my studio. There's kind of that greenish, swampy brown kind of area, is then this really saturated, transparent purple with the backlighting. So there's a lot of different possibilities for sort of framing and presenting this work on film. I'm not going to show this video, but you can see that the film, before it is fixed, is still opaque. So the fixer in the process for both the works on paper and the works on film, the fixer is not developer. The only thing the fixer is doing is taking the silver out of the paper that wasn't exposed so that it doesn't keep darkening in the sun. And then there's this red sort of filtered backing on the film that also dissolves into the fixer. So these are framed so that the Lumen print on film is sandwiched again between the pieces of acrylic glass, but it's installed so that it's coming out of the wall perpendicularly. And in the video on the left, I'm moving the spotlight around and across the print, and you can see just how dynamic the material really is and how much potential it has, you know, for all kinds of different exhibition formats. You know, there's like a temporal effect and a spatial effect that transparency lends itself toward. Here's just a quick sketch of an idea for, you know, I built this little mock-up of a Lumen print on film, like in a wooden slide holder, sort of with a light projecting through it, and then a magnifying glass, like you'd be getting it real big. So there's that big thing again. How can I show everything real big? And this projection, you get this symmetrical projection effect. Sort of relates back to work from, over the course of the years. And then sort of wrapping up here, another use for the film that I have experimented with is placing it directly on other black and white silver gelatin paper and exposing it to the sun so that I get a lumen print of a lumen print on film. So I can make multiples, I can repeat it and flip it, and I can also do it on cyanotype. So that brings me back around to the beginning of the talk. Okay, so if there's anything that people want to see closer up, or questions, or yeah, I'm done talking.
Thank you, Shaina. That was wonderful. I was making notes as I was listening to you, and you just started to answer all of my questions. My one question was, how did it, how do you stop that process when but you answered it, as far as the film goes. If anybody has any questions for Shaina, we're a pretty large group, but if you want to unmute yourself and ask her, that would be great. If you'd like to write it in the chat, I can administer that to her. But just start to ask questions and fire away. We're here. I know there's many students who are photographers too, taking Julie's class. So please ask Shaina, she's here as a resource for you. So I always say there's no stupid question, especially, we have this advantage of this working artist, who is, doing her craft and obviously showing in several galleries. So congratulations on that, Shaina. So please ask her any questions. She's been a busy, busy woman.
Yeah, I can't wait to make art again.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? If nobody has any questions, do you want to talk about that process? I mean, I know that you had to frame work for us, and you had, 2 different other shows going on. Julie has a question. Julie, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. Hi, Shaina.
Hi.
Excellent talk. And I loved your way of presenting your work, how you had mapped it out. I've never seen that. So that was very refreshing.
Oh, thank you. I was a little nervous about that experimental format, but
I think it worked. I was like, what's going on here? It was, and then you could reference back and not flip back through. That really, I have to say, was eye-opening experience for me.
Thank you.
But I learned so much, and I'm glad to see some of my students in here. I'm teaching alternative photography, and so I definitely was perplexed by how you're able to do some of the work that you've been doing. And I'm still, even though you're explaining it, I'm still, I think, confounded. But
well,
anyway,
let's talk. I mean, let's talk in real life. But sorry, go on.
So anyways, just your work is so lovely, and I loved hearing you talk about it. I guess my question will be, I loved also your strips of the samples of paper, and also how your typology of the different types of papers you've used in the film. So that was also really interesting. There's so much research that you have here that I think it's amazing. So I look forward to your book. And I haven't asked the question yet, but I guess my question is, how do you, I know you're saying you're fixing it, but we've tried making some of these in the classroom with the students, and the image disappears or gets way too dark, and we've tried multiple ways. So that's why I'm just perplexed how you're able to do it.
Interesting. So you're, are you putting, you're talking about lumen prints in particular? And you're putting objects onto the paper. Is that how you're making the print?
Basically, students they would cut test strips, and they weren't throwing them away. And so I picked up all the test strips that were abandoned, left out in the darkroom. And then we just put them in the developer and then tried to fix them, because we saw how they had been exposed under the amber light for a long period of time, but it was not put under UV light.
Oh, okay. So Lumen Prints, I think so Christina Z. Anderson, in her book of alternative, or the Guide to Alternative Photographic Processes, she has a short explanation. Well, actually, I don't know if it's that short. I mean, but she has a good explanation of the lumen printing process. My understanding is that lumen printing is specific to using ultraviolet light. So the amber light in the darkroom is not the same. I don't think it's gonna make a lumen print. But also, I'm not using developer. So when I expose I'm like looking around my studio for like something that hasn't been fixed yet to show you, but when you put the paper in the ultraviolet light, you start to see it changing colors almost immediately, and then it's sort of the longer the exposure, the darker the image. But you know, I don't use like, I don't put like little, I don't put stuff on the paper, so I can't speak to, you know, maybe like if light is getting underneath the object, like if that's making the image disappear. But yeah, maybe I could like, yeah, I'd love to troubleshoot this more specifically and see what you have done, but I don't use developer either.
All right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And thanks for the tip on Christina Z.
Yeah.
So Shaina, let's go back to how you can't wait to make art again. So I assume that you made a bunch of work and you know, were accepted into these galleries and then had to start that process of framing. Or can you talk about that, like what you've been doing for the past month, you know, few months, or what you've been involved in?
So there's obviously the show at UNH right now. And then I have been so excited about this work that I have applied to more things more often than I ever have. I think just because I'm so excited to and so all of a sudden, all these, you know, like I was rejected by, you know, 9 out of 10 of everything, but there were these things, and they all happened at the same time, which is so exciting. But anyway, so there's the show in Cambridge at Gallery 263, and for that one, so that show is all lumen prints, and so for that one, I really had to buckle down on like exactly how I wanted to present, especially the works on film. So sort of building those standoff frames, and also, yeah, like getting ready to make those super large negatives for the windows. Yeah, so that occupied, just sort of the logistics of all that occupied my attention. And it's you know, it's part of the work, it's part of the practice, is also how you know, the work is framed when it's being not just framed physically, but like framed figuratively.
I think that's a great point. I think that students really need to learn, you know, if you're going to make this work, how is it going to be presented? And so I think that's a really important part for yourself as an artist, you know, how you want to present it and how it will be, I guess, physically presented. When you say build, did you build those frames? Did you reach out to somebody, a professional framer, to do that? Or is that all you? Because I find that interesting as well.
the super large frames at the museum for those cyanotypes are professional. That's too, that takes a special experienced person. So thank you to Kennedy Framing in Portsmouth. The smaller ones and the medium-sized ones on paper, I built the prototype for the frame, and then I have a friend with a wood shop who is more of a better craftsman in that sense than I am, and he helped me sort of mill all the wood for those, because those like super wide slide holder like film frames are, I mean, they're kind of I guess kind of specialized. So the wood all has to be like routed and whatever. So he helped me do all that, and then I put them together. I built them all in my studio once I had that stuff. But then all the ones for the Lumen negatives or the Lumen prints on film, those I built myself through just a lot of trial and error. And I really love the when you go to the hardware store, like all the little trays of like little bolts and acorn nuts and so just sort of familiarizing myself with all that stuff helped.
Sure. And those negatives that are framed, those are individual pieces. I noticed that they were displayed as one big square. Are they considered individual pieces, or is that one big piece?
That the grid of those, I consider those individual pieces. I think that's an interesting question, because I do think of the variety as, you know, to contextualize each one. I also want to, you know, neighbor it with all of its friends. But no, I guess I don't think of that as one piece, that grid.
Mm-hmm. And as a consumer, I think of it as, well, I can't just have just one. They have to, I have to have a few. It's like having a dinner plate set that's all different, you know, and created equally but different, and not matching, you know. So I think of it as a good marketing tool too. Let's see. I think we have Madison, my fellowship student, has a question for you. She says, amazing talk. I'm glad you get to start creating again. I'm also interested to hear about your process as a working artist. Is there any methods or tricks you have to get your workday started and motivated for creating all day?
Creating all day, I think, is the key piece of that sentence. I am and have always been, and I know people don't like morning people, but I am a morning person. I open my eyes and I am awake, and so I getting started early and not getting distracted by other things, you know, early on in the day sets me on a good, like, then I don't really have trouble, because then I'm like, you know, elbow deep in paper and fixer and, you know, cyanotype chemistry, and so I can't stop. So for me, starting early, but I guess that's just not true for everybody. And just being excited, like, you know, truly being connected to and excited and curious about the work and the process. Like I have a lot of questions that I answer through my practice. And if I don't know, like there have been times when I'm not as curious about the work, I'm just making it because I like it. And then at those times, I think it's a little bit maybe harder to work for extended periods, but yeah, that's a good question.
On top of that question, Shaina, do you work, you know, 5 days a week? Do you take the weekends off, or do you just have kind of a schedule where you're like, I'm going to be in my studio during the week, or is it just like?
Yeah, I work right now and I guess over the past year, like I know my husband's on this Zoom thing, but I tiptoe up to my studio on a Sunday morning to not wake anybody up. And I inevitably knock something over and do wake him up. But I think like right now I'm essentially working every day or thinking about work if I'm not working, and just like Googling stuff related to the work, and I work every day.
Great, great.
Right. It hasn't always been true. I think just like in the last year or two or so, just like, super productive.
Well, Karen Ladd has her hand up. So Karen, if you want to unmute yourself and ask Shaina a question, that would be great.
Thank you. Hi, Shaina.
Hi, Karen.
I was wondering, you talked many times about, I wrote down many wonderful things that you said, but a lot about mapping, recording, and feeling where the paper wants to fold itself so it doesn't rip. So I was wondering if you map folds you've already done to try not to repeat certain folds, or if you find yourself wanting to repeat certain folds or the paper wanting to repeat similar folds kind of consistently, even though you're using different paper, but I'm sure like the thickness is probably fairly similar. So I didn't know if you've been doing your own mapping of those folds and or find yourself going to the same ones over and over because you like them.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a couple, I want to make sure I answer all the parts of that question that came into my head. So I have mapped the fold patterns, and I have done so by taking a rubbing of, because the creases are still in the paper, like when it's all done. So I have taken a rubbing, and that in order to try to repeat the results. I did that specifically for a print that was a commission that then turned out like so great. And I was a little bit like, I don't want to, I want to keep it. So I mapped that one out and couldn't reproduce it because as the folds start to, so that this is a folded piece, not a crumpled piece. As I'm, even though I have like measured and transposed all the spots where the creases are going to be, like whether they're a mountain or a valley, any little tiny, like, 1 degree off thing that happens, or like it's a half a centimeter short of where the vertex was supposed to be, starts to change everything. Like the geometric limitations of flat folding start to, like the distortion just starts to tessellate across the paper, and it's pretty difficult unless it's, just like 4 folds or 6 folds or something. But the complicated ones are, I have found to be not theoretically reproducible, not actually reproducible. And then another thing that came in my head to answer your question is that I find myself, I'm kind of, I want to steer away from style or design when I'm making my work. And so, of course, everything has style or design, right? Or an aesthetic quality, but I want to continue letting the fold patterns determine the exposure rather than rather than fully planning them. And in order to do that, I keep looking at, I have like a geometry textbook that's all about these folding relationships that can only be that can only be demonstrated by actually folding rather than like using a ruler and a compass and stuff. So kind of like going through that book and finding like new relationships between edges and creases, and just trying out different stuff to kind of steer myself more towards surprise and less toward expectation. Does that answer all of that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great.
Yeah, that was fun to answer.
Great. Thank you, Karen, for that great question. Louise, I think you had your hand up next. Are you still there with us? I can only see so many people. Maybe she had to leave. I don't. All right. Rachel, you're next.
Hi, I think Louise came back on. You can go back to her if you want.
Louise, oh, there you are, Louise.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, that's okay.
Hi, you're not Louise.
I'm not Louise.
Oh, you're not.
I wondered, maybe I missed it because I missed some of the early bit of the talk, but I wanted to know, like, your storytelling, your connection to the cyanotype, like because you said you're so curious about what, like, the part that drives you is how your curiosity, and I was wondering, like, what was the hook in there that drew you in that direction?
So I want to enter this question like from all the directions.
Yeah.
So I started doing the cyanotype as a way to just change up the subject matter I was using for the paintings. And I but once I, as I was explaining in the talk, like once I did that, I realized, like, oh, the image is already there. I no longer need to paint it. It's already a finished object. And so getting into the cyanotype, I remembered the excitement that I had making there's a series of those oil paintings where I folded the paper in half, crumpled it, opened it up, and there's like the ink blot effect, like this Rorschach that happens in that crease pattern. And so sort of early on, just like experimenting with different ways to use the cyanotype, once I, had a hook, got interested in that material as like a thing to embed the image, to marry the image with the process. I went back to that way of making the model, because every time I open it, like when I get it all crumpled up, I still don't know what the image is going to be until I wash it out, like until all the, all the undeveloped salt like goes into the water. Like that's when I get to see it. And so there's like, every time there's that surprise element. Yeah, and I think, surprise is like linked to curiosity, right? Does that get at the question?
Yeah, that's great. I love the connection to the like discovering, like it feels super connected to me, the way that you discover the folds of the paper, discover the crinkles, and the way that the light actually draws those out. That feels, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Thanks. I hadn't thought before about the discovering. Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, I hadn't thought about how that crumpling process, like to get it, as I'm finding those like that. Yeah, that's totally, you're right. Thank you.
Thank you.
These are great questions. Thank you so much for contributing. Rachel, are you still there? Would you like to ask?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Hi, Rochelle here.
Hi.
So I had a question and then kind of a statement or observation. So the question is, I noticed one thing on your grid had expired paper, and that's kind of an old fun trick, right? Expired film, expired paper. Did you find working with that was too unpredictable, or are you going to continue to try expired paper, because you could double your grid, Ilford regular, Ilford expired. And I was just wondering if like that was something you tried.
I have used a lot of expired paper. In fact, I most of my, maybe half of my paper is expired. And I like the unpredictability, so that is, no, that doesn't steer me away from using expired paper. Yeah, so I mean, I want to double my grid, and I guess I should. I'm sort of maybe. I think that as a record, so I'm going to like tie this to a question I see in the chat from Amanda Marchand, who is also a Lumen printing artist. So Amanda's question is about recording the names of the photo papers that I'm using. So yes, I am keeping track of the names of the photo papers that I'm using, and I'm keeping track of whether they are expired or not. And I think that like as a record, you know, if that's something that is sort of like becomes a bank, like becomes a resource, that I guess I'm not sure what the result would be like if I have expired Port Riga Rapid from 1976. Is that going to look the same? Are the colors going to be the same as one from 1966 or 87 or that I don't know the answer to, because I haven't yet purchased. So you mentioned like new and expired, like I haven't yet purchased both. I'm kind of going in a spiral. Is there, maybe I'm missing.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of curious because I saw it appear on there once, like, and I was like, oh yeah, that totally, and it looked to me in the grid that you showed, it was like more vibrant actually, like or more yellowy. And I was just thought that, yeah, it must be totally unpredictable, but sort of fun to work with too. Yeah. And my other sort of statement more was like, to me, the drawing work and this work has, you know, both have so much technical virtuosity, but it seems like most audiences would more easily understand the drawing, right? Or that there's this sort of thing like, well, that's a drawing, right? And that people often respond well to that. Do you find that this work is like harder to communicate, or do you find people are just as interested in the colors, the reflection, the way it handles light? I guess it's sort of about audience reception of the sort of drawings versus these. Yeah, that's that is something that I think about, that I have thought about, especially like when I'm sort of making that transition. It's like, well, you know, I'm getting a lot of like positive reinforcement about it. What a good drawer I am, which feels good, you know, and being good at the drawing was part of the work. But yeah, to answer your question, like, I think there might be a slightly different audience. Like, you know, there's some overlap of people who were excited about the drawing and painting and are now excited about what I'm doing now. But I think maybe if I speak from a professional standpoint, and it might also just be like a matter of my own practice and time, I guess I feel like there's a lot more opportunity for visibility with this work that I'm doing now. And I wonder if that also has to do with, you know, I think I have made a closer connection to the underlying kind of theoretical piece than, you know, the drawings. We're getting there, and you know, I might find something else that's even going to be even closer to the conceptual part that I'm interested in. But for now, I'm at least a little bit closer, and I think that sort of unification of the whole practice and process with the material and the image. I hope, you know, or like, yeah, maybe that is coming across and getting a good reception. Yeah, I don't know if
don't know if my dad's on the call, on the Zoom thing. I haven't looked through the audience yet. But you know, and he's very open-minded about artwork. But you know, I think when I make this kind of transition, he's like, yeah, but you were so like, oh, those drawings were so good. You know, like there's a little regret, you know, on the part of some people, but yeah, it was long-winded.
No regret, Shaina.
Oh, my dad.
Well, I
sorry.
appreciate all that you do, Shaina, and I'm particularly interested in the difference between the surprise and expectation, because initially you're surprised and delighted with the outcome, but eventually you kind of master it such that you do have expectations for what's going to come out, and then that leads to you know, your ability to control and be more expressive. So I fully appreciated all your work, Shaina, and all your innovation. So.
Thanks, Dad. I didn't mean to put you under the in the heat there. Yeah, but that's really perceptive. Like I think you're right that trying to keep things fresh and exciting and new does lead to a certain, like, you know, expectation, or like expectation in combination with the process sort of starts to become like mastery in a way. Now, I don't mean to say that I have mastered the work, but there's, you know, there's sort of, as that comes together, I am given more control. So I think introducing like these other limitations from outside sources can keep redirecting, like keep steering me away from that, the overlap between expectation and control.
Shaina, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. Thank you for all those great questions. We are just about out of time, and I want to respect everybody's time on, you know, this mid-week, mid-afternoon talk. I appreciate everybody who's come and attended. I will do a follow-up email with all the information for the recorded YouTube. I'm going to shamelessly plug the museum. Please follow us on Instagram, MOA at UNH. We also have a Facebook page. Please visit our website. You can see the work virtually. We have a virtual exhibit online, so you can virtually visit the exhibition. If you are to come to campus and you are not in the testing bubble of UNH, please contact me with your name and date and time you want to come to the exhibit. And due to UNH COVID policies, I will have to submit a form to the COVID team to get approval. It is possible for you to come. They are not recognizing vaccinations right now. So I just need to let them know that you are interested in coming, and I can do that for you. Again, I'll send an email with all of this in it so you don't have to remember anything. And I just wanted to thank Shaina again for spending time with us. That was a wonderful talk. Really well thought out about your processes and your thinking and where you're going and where you've been. It was just really pitch perfect, I think.
Thank you.
I also want you to be able to plug, you know, your website, your Instagram, and again, you know, you can certainly do that.
My website is ShainaGates.com. The shows and my Instagram is at Shaina Gates, so those are easy to find. The shows that I have up in addition to the Impact show are There's one opening Friday in Vermont at Tourist. Their Instagram is at tourist.vermont. They also have a website, but I'm not sure. I think that's more of a landing spot. And then Gallery 263's website is either .com or .org. I'm sorry, Gallery 263.
That's okay.
But you can. They are very visible on the internet, so they're easy to find. And I'm having a virtual tour of my show at Gallery 263 next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So you can go to Gallery 263's website and get into that talk if you're interested. And I think that's all the things.
Okay, I'll include all of that information in my email too. That would be easy for me to include so that they can follow you and, be in contact with you and find out, what's next for you or what's coming up or possibly purchase work from you. Yeah, no problem. And again, thank you to the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for giving us the opportunity to display, the finalist work and the award winner work every year. We think it's a really important exhibition to, highlight our Seacoast artists and the important work that they're doing, and also give our students a chance to, be exposed to these wonderful people that are just, in our neighborhood that they can talk to and utilize and look to as mentors. So thank you again, Shaina. And if anybody has any questions, you can contact me at sarahclaughlin@unh.edu. So thank you so much, Shaina.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks everyone for coming.